Hi guys, so in today's video we're going to be looking at techniques and methods to sharpening these recurved knives. Had a lot of people mention this in the last video, so that's what you're going to get today. The first half of this video is going to be focusing on the technique and different methods used for recurves, and then at the end of the video we're going to do a real-time talk through about applying those techniques in real time. Be sure to check the chapters below and they will take you exactly where you want to go. First off, I would recommend go and watch that video because we're not going to be going over the same techniques in that video since we already went over them, but all of those same techniques apply to this video. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So with that being said, let's get started. The knife that I'm going to be using, and I know I'm going to get questions about this, is going to be the Cold Steel Spartan. This was one of the first knives that I bought way back in the day. I think it was like right after this knife came out. When I was first getting into knives, and it is a monster. It is a conversation piece, and that's about it. It's really not a good knife. I think this thing Rockwelled at like 55 HRC. 55. It has, I think this is AUS 8 steel, if I remember correctly. It takes up a lot of room in the pocket. The blade is giant and thick. It doesn't cut well. It doesn't carry well. It is fairly awkward when pulling it out of the pocket and then transferring your grip into this weird odd shaped grip here. But it does one thing well, which is it starts conversations. So if you are going through your knife collection with a non-knife person and you hand them this knife and a $1,300 custom folder, the knife that they're going to remember is this $60 Cold Steel Spartan, and that's what this thing costs right now. I'll leave a link to it below if you're interested in this conversation piece. But this thing is a monster. I very rarely use it. I think I've carried it one time and realized that it wasn't for me. So now let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is quickly go over what we covered in the last video, which was when we're sharpening knives, what I recommend people do is take the knife and lock your wrist and sort of lock your elbow in place. This is what maintains the angle, this lock right here. And it doesn't matter if you lock your wrist like this, like this, like this, like this, as long as this does not move during the sharpening process. So I'll demonstrate that here now. What we're gonna do, I'm gonna angle the stone so you can hopefully see it better. Let's see, right there is I'll set the knife on the stone. I'll use the rule of thumb, which we covered in the last video. We'll place that on the knife, and this is our angle. So now I wanna lock everything in place. I wanna lock the wrist, the elbow, and all of this right in here in place. This does not move throughout the sharpening process. You can use your entire body to push the knife across the stone, or you can pivot at the elbow. But as you will see, this stays locked. And again, you can angle it. Let's see, if we're angled like this, you may angle your wrist slightly bent like so, and that's okay. As long as that doesn't move, whatever is more comfortable for you, that's what you need to do. But this does not need to move. The reason for that is because your wrist moves in all different directions. It'll even twist like this. This needs to stay locked. Your elbow only moves in one direction. And that is where the movement needs to come from, either your elbow or your entire body. And that's the reason why this maintains that angle the best. Now, the problem lies, let me flip this over, when we get a blade that looks like this. It has a giant recurve. It's not flat, and it then transfers into a giant belly. So we have basically the worst of both worlds. So now, can we still use that same technique on a knife like this? And if so, how do we do that? Well, the answer is yes. And I actually talked to a couple of people in the last video that said that that technique does not work on recurves. You have to involve your wrist, and that is not true. Let me show you how this works. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take the knife, and the only way to get this area in here is to use the corner of the stone, and we're actually going to drop the heel of the knife down like so to get that recurve area. Now, as we move the knife across the stone, we're going to lift the heel of the knife up. Now, what's important about that method there is that our angle doesn't change. When we rotate the knife in this axis here, our angle stays the same. When we start rotating the knife in this axis, in order to get the belly and the recurve, our angle will start changing. And it's much harder to do that with a joint that moves in all different directions. So what I recommend doing is people use the same technique. So what we're going to do is we're going to lock our wrist in place. We're going to place the recurve portion on the corner of the stone, and we're going to drop our elbow and everything all the way down so that we hit that recurve area. Now, as we push the knife along the stone, we're going to simply raise our elbow. Now, if you noticed, my wrist did not move. All we did was move the elbow up. Now, this is the basic principle behind locking the locked wrist method. So it works the same. Our wrist, the only movement, it can either come from, the movement actually comes from your entire body, moving the knife across the stone, or your elbow, but your wrist doesn't move. Very important that your wrist does not move. Now we can actually break this down into smaller movements, and that's what I suggest you do when you are sharpening a recurve, especially when this is as extreme as this, is we'll break this down into much smaller movements. We're going to break this blade down into maybe 2 separate areas. We're going to focus on the recurve section, and then we'll focus on the belly. So in doing that, I'll set the knife on the stone, I'll lock everything in place, and I'm just going to use some very small passes like so. And it may not look as obvious in the video because of course I'm exaggerating a little bit as I show you here, but it really doesn't take that much movement or that much movement in this axis to hit this tiny little recurve here. So we're maintaining contact with the corner of the stone by just bringing the elbow up ever so slightly. Now, when we move on to the belly portion, and I'll sharpen a little bit. So elbow's locked. We're dropping our elbow. And actually, our elbow's locked. All of the movement is coming from my upper body here. Now we can switch our angle up a little bit, and by angle I mean we're going to raise our elbow and we can focus on more of the belly portion of the knife. Now it may look funny, moving your whole body across a stone like this, but that's what it takes to get really good edges on knives like this that have big bellies in them. That's the reason why I would not recommend learning to sharpen on recurves like this. Pick a nice knife, sort of like this, something cheap, $1. You can get used to grinding metal off of knife blades and creating that apex and the burr. Get used to doing that first before you move on to something like this. These are not easy knives to sharpen. Now, there's several other methods that you can use to sharpen these. There's several other different ways that you can use to sharpen these. The same method, the sharpening technique remains the same. So let's go over those real quick. So this right here is a Sharpall diamond stone. This is the one that I recommend. It's a 325 1200. I mentioned this stone a lot. It's a really good value for the $69 I think that it's currently selling for. You get 2 really good stones in one. You get a case and an angle guide, which we've gone over in another video. But this is a flat stone. The diamonds are all the way out to the corner here, and that really helps with recurves. You definitely need that when sharpening recurves. Now, some of these diamond stones have come to me, and not this particular brand. Other brands have come to me where there is very little to no diamond out here along the corners. DMT is one of those stones that comes to mind. I have a DMT stone where they sort of missed the corners of the stone right here, and that's no good for recurves. You need the diamonds all the way out to the corner here. Now, that's one reason why these may not be the best thing to use for recurves in the first place. So let me move on and show you another option that you can have. Now, I am not recommending this stone. We've gone over this stone in multiple videos in the past. This is a cheap aluminum oxide stone, but the principle here applies to other stones like the Shapton Koramakus or something like that of a much higher quality ceramic stone. So basically what we're going to do is I've done it already a little to this stone. These stones have very hard corners on them, meaning hard or sharp corners. And what you can do is you can take a cheap diamond stone like this one, $10 from Amazon, or you can even do this on a sidewalk. It doesn't matter, but you can round over the corner of these stones so that you have a round surface for your recurve to have more surface area on when you're sharpening. And I don't sharpen recurves that often, so I don't have any stones that are like this that I can really show you. This is actually my own, or my only real recurve. I have a Kershaw around here somewhere that has a little bit of a recurve, but it's not necessary to do that to a knife like that. But if you do sharpen a lot of recurves, you may want to think about modifying your sharpening stones like this to help sharpen them, because that will give you a lot more surface area to sharpen on. But the same principle still applies. You need to drop the heel of the knife down and lift it up to maintain contact with the sharpening stone. Now, another stone that you can look into, and this is what I think most, if you were to ask any of the pro sharpeners out there, guys who are sharpening knives all the time on stones, what they're using, they're going to be using something like this. These are small, narrow stones. This one is from, I think this is an Edge Pro stone, and then these are two Veneve stones. These are my favorite stones, by the way, link below. Not sponsored, but I like these stones the most. They're very expensive, as you'll see if you click on the link, but these things are amazing stones. Completely overkill for the Spartan here, but if you're sharpening a lot of super steels, definitely recommend these things. But what these narrow stones allow you to do is, again, they allow you to have more surface area when you're sharpening the recurve knives, because your entire stone fits inside of that recurve. And if you only use these for recurve, they'll end up developing sort of a curved radius on the surface of them, and then they're going to be really good. But you're going to have to then transfer onto flat stones for the belly of the knife. Now, they even make these in half-inch versions. These are 1-inch version. They make them in half the width, and that is what I think most pro sharpeners are using on these recurves. And that allows the entire recurve area to have contact with the surface of a sharpening stone. But again, the exact same technique applies to sharpening these. You're going to still have to drop the knife down, the handle of the knife down like so, and then raise it in order to hit that belly. Make sure that the rotation happens in this direction, not in this direction, or I'm trying to do it in the camera here, or in this direction. This will almost always get you in trouble at some point along the way. So as long as you're raising in this axis here and not this one, you should be okay. So those are sort of the 3 different main techniques or sharpening methods that you can use in order to get these recurves. You can also, I think you can actually buy curved sharpening stones, but again, the same technique applies, and you're going to have to transition to a flat stone when you go back to do the belly anyway. These things are just difficult to sharpen. There's no 2 ways about it. If you plan on getting into recurves like this, let it be known that you could have some frustrating sharpening sessions ahead of you learning that new technique. Now, let's move on to stropping. Now, stropping recurve knives is going to be the exact same principle. However, I would recommend, a lot of people strop with the strop handheld, like so. I don't recommend doing that. I don't do that myself. Even with regular knives, a lot of times I don't strop holding the strop in my hand. I strop with the strop sitting on a workbench. So let me adjust myself here. We'll get situated. I recommend setting the strop on the corner of your workbench or corner of a table or countertop or whatever. I'm using this little rubber thing to keep it from sliding around. And the same technique. We're going to start high like so we get the tip of the knife, and as we strop, we're going to drop our elbow to get in that recurve. So we're starting high and dropping the elbow. Start high, strop sliding around here. I normally clamp this down with clamps when I'm doing this, but for the sake of the video, So there's no wrist movement. It's all coming from dropping the elbow. Now, something that you do have to be mindful of when you are stropping recurves or even sharpening recurves is pressure. Remember that as you get into that recurve area, right in there, you're going to have a whole lot more pressure in that tiny little corner than you would with a flat knife on a flat stone. So in order to keep the strop from curling over the edge by applying way too much pressure from that small surface area, you need to keep that pressure light in that area or you can run into problems. So the same holds true for sharpening stones. If you're sharpening using the corner of a sharpening stone, you're going to have to use way less pressure than you normally would because that contact patch is so small. The smaller the contact patch under the same pressure or the same force equals more pressure on a smaller surface area. We'll try to use correct terminology here for the YouTube engineers. But keep your pressure low on the corner of the strop or the sharpening stone and you'll be in pretty good shape.
Okay, so let's put this into real-time practice here. So first I'm going to start off on the recurve section. I'm going to break the blade down into two sections, the recurve section and the belly of the blade. Right here I'm working on the recurve. Now what you will notice on the recurve section is that the elbow lifting is extremely minimal. We don't have to lift the elbow that much, but when we transfer into the belly of the blade, we are lifting a lot because we have a giant curve. The recurve section isn't curved that much. The blade or the belly of the blade is curved a lot more. That means we have to lift the elbow or change that axis a lot more. And here we go again. You can barely see my elbow lifting whatsoever. And you really don't need to lift that much. Again, it depends on how curved the recurve actually is. But again, when we transfer into the belly of the blade, you'll see that we have to lift the elbow a whole lot more. Now, nobody is perfect, but if you watch me, you'll notice that my wrist doesn't move whatsoever. It is completely locked in place. There is no wrist movement happening during this recurve belly sharpening process. And again, I say this all the time, that is what will get you in trouble, that wrist movement. You do not have to move your wrist, and it doesn't matter how curved that blade is. You want the movement to happen from somewhere else. You want that movement to happen by lifting the handle portion of the knife either up off of the table or lower towards the table. That will get you into those sections where the curves are. Now, I don't sharpen recurves normally. They're just not my thing. I think I have two knives that have legitimate recurves to them, and this is one of them. And I don't carry them. I don't use them that often. And this is probably going to start some controversy, but I think that recurves are simply blade shapes that are designed due to the fact that the knife itself is kind of poorly designed. I know I'm going to get some hate mail for that, but I just don't like recurves. They make life a lot harder for not a whole lot of benefit. So yeah, that's kind of where my stand is with recurves. The only area where I do think that they excel is for certain chopping tasks, but for general pocket knives, you're not going to be chopping anything with pocket knives unless it's the cold steel Spartan.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest this for a chopper.
But realistically, no. For pocket knives, recurves are kind of a waste of time. But that's just my opinion. Your opinion is probably different, and that's fine. Okay, so I've raised the burr. This took me a little bit longer than normal, simply due to the fact that I just don't sharpen recurves that often. But as you'll see here, I'm doing the exact same technique that I would any other knife. We're doing the alternating passes on the stone to minimize that burr as much as possible. So during this burr minimization, you can see I'm doing the entire length of the blade in one pass. And that makes it a little bit more apparent, hopefully, what I'm doing with my elbow here by simply dropping the elbow lower towards the table and then raising that elbow to follow the curvature of that blade on a flat stone. Now I admit this does look funny. It looks funny when you do it. It feels funny when you do it. But it's the only correct way to follow the curvature of that blade without changing the angle. You cannot follow a curved surface or a curved blade on a flat surface by changing the angle in any other direction. So now we've minimized the burr as much as possible. We're going to change over to our strop, and I actually clamped it in place. I'm just using some clamps that I had handy. I normally use the metal clamps, but they're all the way across the workshop and I'm lazy. So what I'm doing here is I'm working tip to heel, and you can see the elbow high, and you'll see it come down as we follow the curved blade shape. Now again, I'm being very careful not to apply too much pressure on the recurve surface where we're working right on the corner of that strop. This is pretty critical. A strop will not roll an edge, but it will roll over the apex and actually dull the apex slightly. If you want those super crisp, really nice sharp edges, you really don't want to apply too much pressure, especially on the corner of a strop or working on the corner of the strop, because you have such little surface area there. You have a lot of force onto a small surface area, which equals a lot of pressure, and that will roll the strop, the soft leather strop, over the corner of that apex and actually dull that apex. And as you can see, we are pretty sharp on this knife all the way from heel to tip. I certainly hope this video was helpful. If you have any other video requests, please leave them in the comments below. Don't forget to check the video description for links to everything that I used in the video. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.